Today, we're diving into a crime that really hinges on one single idea: broken trust. This is our breakdown of embezzlement under Arizona law, specifically ARS 13-1802. We're going to cut right through all the legal jargon and show you exactly what it is, how prosecutors have to prove it, and why the consequences can get so incredibly serious.
Okay, before we get started, we have to get this out of the way, and it's really important. This information is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for legal advice. If you are facing criminal charges under Arizona law, you should speak with an experienced Arizona criminal defense lawyer right away. So let me ask you this. What's the real legal difference between, say, grabbing a few pens from the supply closet versus secretly redirecting company funds into your own account? You might think it's just about the dollar amount, but the law actually draws a much sharper line based on something else entirely. And that brings us to the absolute heart of the matter. This is a crime of broken trust. The key difference isn't always what was taken, but how it was taken. It all boils down to the violation of a trusted relationship. Here's the easiest way to think about it. Regular theft, like shoplifting, is taking something you never had permission to touch in the first place. But embezzlement, that's a whole different ballgame. It starts with you being given lawful access. You have the keys, you have the password, you're in charge of the books. The crime happens the moment you misuse that access for your own benefit. So let's look at the actual legal definition. Under Arizona law, embezzlement is technically a form of theft. It's when someone who's been entrusted with property intentionally uses it for themselves. This is a classic breach of what's called a fiduciary duty, which is just a fancy legal term for the responsibility to act in someone else's best interest. Okay, so if someone is accused of embezzlement, what does a prosecutor actually have to prove in court? It's not enough to just say, hey, the money's gone. They have a very specific checklist of 3 things they have to prove to even have a chance at a conviction. And here they are. These are the 3 core elements they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that you were in that position of trust. You had legitimate access. Second, that you knowingly misused the property. And third, and this is crucial, that you did it intentionally for your own benefit. If the prosecution can't prove all 3 of these, their entire case just falls apart. Now, that word intentionally has a very precise legal meaning. It means you acted with a specific goal in mind. This wasn't just some sloppy bookkeeping or an accident. The prosecutor has to show the court that you acted on purpose, with the objective of depriving the owner of their property. And knowingly is just as important. This is all about awareness. Now, it doesn't mean you needed to know the specific statute number, ARS 13-1802. It just means you were conscious of what you were doing. You knew you were taking the money. You knew you were using the company card for a personal trip. Basically, ignorance of the law is not a defense here. All right, we've covered the what and the why. So now let's get into the how. How does this actually happen in the real world? Embezzlement isn't always some huge, complex scheme you'd see in a movie. A lot of the time, it happens through surprisingly common day-to-day business activities. And here are some of the most common ways. Someone might create a fake company, a ghost vendor, and then pay invoices from their employer right into their own bank account. Or maybe they'll add a ghost employee to the payroll and just collect their paychecks. Skimming cash from the register, padding expense reports, even just using the company credit card for personal shopping can easily lead to a felony charge. And that brings us to a really crucial point: the consequences. In Arizona, the severity of an embezzlement charge is tied directly, and I mean directly, to one thing: the total dollar value of the property that was taken. The higher the value, the bigger the consequences. Just take a look at this table. It shows you exactly how fast the stakes get higher. If you take less than $1,000, it's a misdemeanor. But the second you cross that $1,000 threshold, bam, it's a felony. And you can see how it just keeps climbing until you get to that top tier, $25,000 or more, which is a Class 2 felony. That's right, a Class 2 felony for embezzlement could mean a potential prison sentence of up to 12.5 years. This is why a lot of small, repeated actions can be so dangerous. They add up over time and can easily push someone into a value range that carries these incredibly severe penalties. So with consequences like that on the line, what are the critical next steps if you're ever facing an investigation or a charge? Well, time is absolutely a factor, and there are some really important deadlines you need to understand. This leads to a common and really vital question. Is there a deadline? Does the state have forever to bring a case against someone? The answer is no, and it's something called the statute of limitations. And the clock is very, very different depending on the charge. For a misdemeanor embezzlement case, prosecutors only have 1 year to file charges. But for any felony, which, as we saw, starts at just $1,000, that window expands to a full 7 years. That gives them a very long time to investigate and build their case. Look, it's so important to understand that an embezzlement allegation is not something to brush off. A conviction isn't just about potential prison time or fines. It's a permanent criminal record that can absolutely affect your career, your reputation, and pretty much your entire future. And that brings us to the single most critical piece of advice we can possibly share. Don't try navigating the legal system alone. The stakes are just way too high. Understanding the law is the first step, and hopefully we've helped with that today. But successfully navigating the system itself requires experienced help. Thanks for tuning in.